as I ever have been to welcome our presenter, Mr. Seth Lawrence-Slavas. He is our 35th guest lecturer in the series. And the reason I'm especially pleased is that he is a graduate of both our BCT undergrad programs and our graduate programs. Mr. Lawrence-Slavas is president and principal of Wright Builders. It's a company headquartered here in Western Mass with over 20 years of multidiscipline high-performance building experience. Over that period of time, Wright Builders has accumulated in-depth knowledge of the net zero energy building process, incorporating high-performance envelope systems, advanced high-performance mechanical systems, all coupled with constructing with low embodied carbon materials. His combination of academic background and real-world AEC experience makes him uniquely placed to convey to us what it's like to build affordable, high-performance buildings in our new COVID era. As material prices soared, labor availability plummeted, and shipping delays caused chaos in the building world, there remained and remains the need to provide affordable, safe, energy efficient buildings for the majority of the population. This lecture will supply an honest look at what it means to be building for the future in our new reality. So please welcome Seth Lawrence-Slavas. Okay. Whenever you're ready, share theirs. Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. We good, Kath? They can see it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. Carl, Peggy, it's really good to see you guys again. It's been a few years since I sat in those chairs that all of you sit in now, watching some other person ramble through a great presentation. I guess, to start this, I don't know if the COVID era is here to stay. I think the reality is that there's an era of increased disease. Climate change is affecting many things around us. Energy prices are raising. There's a serious lack of a labor shortage still. We have very few people coming into trades and leaving trades, and it's creating a perfect storm right now in the building world. So I'm going to try to get through this and be as upbeat as possible about what's going on out there, because there's some difficulties and there's some struggles, and there's stuff that no matter how you look at it, it makes life harder as a constructor, as a designer, and as an architect, engineer. So that being said, I'll jump right in here. Overview. So who I am. I think Carl said most of it. It was good. I did get a bachelor's degree from UMass, from BCT here. I came here way later than probably most of you who are sitting there. I made a lot of mistakes and built a lot of things before I showed up in this school, and realized that there was so much that I didn't know and that I needed to know to build responsibly, and to build performance buildings that were going to be here for 100 years and treat the inhabitants of those buildings respectively. So I signed up, I came to school, I went through my bachelor's, I worked with Peggy and I worked with Carl hand in hand on a daily basis. I taught classes as a teacher's aide, much to the demise of most people. And then I was asked to stay here for a master's degree. I got really into Peggy's research with the CLT and the hemlock and pine species in particular, and finding panel layups and suggestions that work. And so I did the master's program. I graduated, 2008, 2019 from that program. At that same year, I got my lead AP, BD, and C, and I have gone and gotten many other certifications and training since then as I've been out on the workforce. I don't always just build. I enjoy being outside. I enjoy fishing and sailing. I grew up here, but I went out west at a young age and lived the ski bum life in Colorado and Summit County. Enjoyed that thoroughly and made a bunch of big houses for people that had a lot of money to go skiing with. And then I came back here and realized that I really enjoy the Northeast. I enjoy the people here and the mindset and the way of life in general. And I met my wife here. I married her, obviously, because she's my wife. We're still married. We have 2 kids. And I'm enjoying that experience wholeheartedly. So here I am now, enjoying this experience with all of you, and I'll get into the lecture now that we know about me here. Oh yeah, I found some pictures, Peggy, probably on the website. But these were people that I worked hand in hand with for that really 2 years, and we still keep in touch, and this program really does connect a lot of things in life. And I think everybody in it is a really class act group of people and follow the same things once they get out of here. So kudos to all of you for being here. So some of the objectives here, I'm going to try to quantify what affordable means. It's like sustainability. It's one of those type of words where it really can mean anything you want it to mean, quite honestly. But I will try to get that conveyed here. I'll discuss a lot of means and methods to the building that we do at Wright Builders, but also to the building that you will most likely do when you leave these doors and go out on the workforce on your own. High performance systems and creating equity within that community that we're working with. It's a really important part of affordability, is making sure that it's an equitable solution for everybody involved. I'll also go into the pandemic. Unfortunately, we are in the pandemic, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit. It's not going to be the center of this presentation, but I will talk about it because there are some difficulties that are presented that are hard at first, but really at the end of the day, they present themselves as opportunities to do a lot better work than what we're doing now. So, here's some boring affordability stuff. Having a cost that's not too high. So that's helpful, right? It means that, you know, all of you can afford the same things that I can afford or that Carl can afford, or anybody who's already emerged their professional lives, they can afford the exact same things. Everybody's equal, right? It's a really easy concept to grasp. It's not the truth at all, but it's always interpreted that way. It's thought as single family home is affordable. That means that anybody can afford it, and that's not the truth. And when I started working at Wright Builders, if you don't know much about Wright Builders, we build custom homes, and they're net zero. They have to be net zero. We've made a 100% commitment to that in our homes. They have to be WaterSense certified. They have to be lots of certifications. That adds a little bit of cost to stuff, but more importantly, it puts our typical clientele into a already emerged professional, or even older than that, into the retirement age clientele. I was a young guy going into that business, and it really mattered to me to create something when I first got there that was that I could afford, quite honestly. That, you know, somebody who's just getting out of the workforce, somebody who makes median income, maybe 120% of median income, can actually afford to build something that is net zero and lasts forever. Because in the end of the day, the people who need a net zero house, who need a high performance house the most, are generally and usually the people who can't afford that technology. And so we're stuck in a conundrum. We have affordable places, but the usage and the overall affordability of living there is not congruent with the price of the house. The government, and all its wisdom that it seems to always push forward, has created a threshold comparing that to most of the population and what that means to be affordable. And that threshold is what we're going to talk a little bit today about, but more importantly, that threshold varies from county to county, from town to town, and from state to state, quite a bit. So what's affordable in Western Massachusetts is not necessarily the same price point as what's affordable in Nashville, Tennessee. HUD is the people, right? They're the ones behind that housing and urban development. So they put some categories of income based off of how funding flows to those projects or to those rent control, right? So they look at 30% of median income. So area median income, meaning if we're in Hampshire County, it's 30% of the median income in Hampshire County. That's considered extremely low income. It really means that you can afford rent and that's about it.
What is the median income?
So yeah, I'll get to there. It's moving a little bit. Right now, a family of 4 is 68,000. Last year, or 2020, the median income was 71,000. So we actually lost $3,000 last year in median income, which is not a good story to tell. It means that, well, COVID has probably had an effect on incomes in this area, but it also means that the affordability of this area is creeping downward, and it's making that gap that much bigger. So I don't want, again, no doom and gloom here, but so it goes through it. 50%, they have a limit. They have 60%, 80%, and then 70% talks about rent, and it's only rent only. So what does this mean? Well, it means that projects that are considered affordability projects, or that you see affordable housing, they have to meet these guidelines. The people who get into the houses have to meet these guidelines. Now, if you're at 60% of median income and you're trying to get a loan for a house, it's not 100% the case, but there's very few people out there who are making 60% of $68,000 as a family of 4 and have good credit. In fact, I don't know what the percentage, but it's very low of people that actually can afford something in that 60%. So it falls on us as builders, as the community, to look at these things and what the affordable housing pushes in those areas. So there's another set that HUD puts. They say that 30% of your income, if you're 80% median income of this area, it says that 30% of that income should go to housing. If it's over 30% of your income that is going to housing, you're considered overburdened. As a note, Hampshire County is at 51% of the people who live here are considered overburdened people, meaning they're paying more towards rent and they're saving less, and they're unable, again, to have true affordability in their life. They might be able to afford a place over their head, but they're not able to save. They're not able to have that operational affordability through their life process. Here are some adjusted home income limits, just as a note. These are 2021 prices. 2022 adjusted will come out in December of 2022. So it's always a year behind. So keep that in mind. This is in COVID era. It's two different scenarios here. I chose Franklin County mostly because Franklin County is one of the poorest counties in the Commonwealth. It's really the same in the same realm as Berkshire County, but you can see their adjusted gross incomes of compared to Lowell, which is not a high-end rent district, but you can see the differences in affordability from being in a city setting to being in a more rural setting. Now, cities offer lots of benefits that rural sections don't offer for people. Public transportation, usually better healthcare availability, more hospitals within a certain area. So you start seeing this big gap forming between rural areas and city areas. And if you start looking at the higher end places in Boston, you start seeing a really big gap where affordability numbers are in the 200,000 range for a family of 5. So what does that mean? Well, it means that funding and building in places in urban developments have a better way of creating affordability. They have more ability to have a nicer place at a higher affordable rate because people can actually pay for that and get loans for that. And it puts a lot of pressure on the local governments in the small rural sections to increase their funding or find other sources for the affordability to happen. So what can we do about affordability? I like to say that our specifications really push everything in life. In building, they do the same thing. When we specify anything as AIC individuals, we should be thinking about a few different things. Where they're coming from, who they're being produced by, why they're being produced, with what materials, and what kind of environmental aspects are coming into play and negatives that are happening. So in the COVID era, it's hard to find these things. Specialty items, exotic woods, tiles. If we're specifying those things in affordable housing, we are not able to hit goals that we need for the high performance of those houses, the operational efficiency of those houses. We're spending money in places that doesn't make sense. So that's something first and foremost that you do not specify in these buildings. We want to specify wood framing. It's easy, it's clean, there's carbon sequestration. It's difficult, but you can find local sources for framing lumber. It takes a little bit more time. Oops. We want to specify healthy materials because, well, of course you want to specify healthy materials. You're living in this house. 90% of your time is in this house. If we're talking about affordability and we try to find the cheapest carpet we can, that cheap carpet has things in it that are constantly releasing into the atmosphere that you're living in. We want to be combustion free. If we get to electrification, we get rid of particulate from combustion, we get rid of the fire danger from combustion, and we clean up the air around us. Having a healthy, affordable house is more of a life choice and a life change to push affordability. Indoor air quality, it follows right through with all of these things. We need mechanical ventilation in all of our houses now. The tightness of them require it. So the indoor air quality is extremely important. We do not want to cut anything out of affordability that is about health and the occupant safety and well-being. Efficient appliances and mechanical systems. At this point, if I see any mechanical systems in a specification that isn't efficient, I'm asking myself a lot. There's no reason why we shouldn't be seeing SEER 20+, why we shouldn't be seeing HSPF ratings of 12+ minimum. These are heat pumps, whether it's air source or water source, COPs, we need to have those 3.5 to 4.1 in that range. If we drop below 3, we start to become we're going backwards. The amount of electricity that we're creating is not at a 3-to-1 ratio. We're staying even. We're not making gains on anything. So specifications are a really easy way of formatting an affordable house. And it's a guideline for it. And if we can find a prescriptive way that specifications work, then we can keep a house going here and affordable. So we're professionals at overcomplicating things. We love it. I think everybody in the community loves it. We sit in charrettes and we talk about all the beautiful things that we can build and all the extra accoutrements that will make the house well. But at the end of the day, the way to be affordable in a high performance house is to keep it simple. I've put up a couple of square boxes here because this is about as simple as something gets. And this is a home that we have designed and built now. And the idea was to push affordability in this line of homes. So you can see there's 4 walls. There's no specialty items here. It's 2x4 framing, smaller footprint, usually less money. You lose the economies of scale a little bit. So in multifamily developments, you get some economies of scale, which push affordability to another level. As a single family, you really have to watch your square footage to make things affordable. You might pay a little bit more per square foot on a single family house. So you have to watch how much square footage you're putting in here. Delays are always the most common things that add money to a project. And so if you can keep things simple, you can keep details down to a minimum, you keep people from doing the wrong thing, then delays will be less. Delays are time, time is money. Money makes things either affordable or not. And it also makes the builder who's building these affordables profitable or not. So it's important to understand these things from a simplicity standpoint and not try to overcomplicate everything because of a design aesthetic or need. So equity is really important to me as an owner of a business. It's important as a builder, certainly important as a father and a husband and as a community member. And equity is paramount to affordability. If you are building affordable buildings and it is not an equitable situation for the community that you're building those buildings in, then you're not building affordable buildings. You're building something that takes away from a community that then has to harbor those buildings forever. So what does that mean? It means you go out, you reach out, you have outreach, you talk to people, you talk to the trades that are working on your building. You talk to the businesses, the vendors, the material suppliers, all of the architect, the engineer community. You talk to those people and you start getting them in a room to get to the same goal that you're trying to do, which is to make things affordable. You are attentive to the details. Again, the where, the who, the when, and the hows. Encouraging civil interaction between the AIC community and building owners. Building owners are the foremost people that are going to look towards affordability and renting. For them, the affordability comes from an operational affordability. Generally speaking, they are paying for most of the utilities in that building. Now, maybe that's put into rent, but as you lower those utility bills and you produce more efficient, high performance buildings, then those owners start taking stake in what you're doing and following suit. We focus on minority-owned businesses, on women businesses, small family establishments. We'd much rather go up the hill into Williamsburg and talk with a family that's cutting wood than go to South Carolina and talk to a corporate sawmill. There are huge equity building parts about looking to the community to get materials and to get vendor sources. One of the biggest parts of the research I did here was trying to figure out who in this area we could actually look for the material that we needed to build what we needed to build. Some things you just can't find. Huber wood products are not developed in, Amherst, Mass. That's not where they're coming from. So there are some things that you just can't get. But in general, the way to make something equity-based and affordable is to look down the street to your neighbor, to the smallest business around. So there's the affordable part. I wanted to talk a little bit about a home that we built. And it's really a collection of homes that we created. Told a little story about it, that I wanted something that I could afford, or at least afford to build. It started off, as a thought, and we developed 3 different plans. We went through the whole system of looking for material and finding local materials. We wanted to use Eastern white pine for siding. We wanted to find the simplest, cleanest look we could do with the least amount of labor needed for this stuff. So it pushed us to a traditional 2x4 double wall framing. It was open web truss floor and roof, all using 2x6 and 2x4 dimensional lumber. We really wanted to stay in the small dimensional lumber and keep our carbon impact down. So we designed them to be net zero ready, net positive buildings with 5 to 6 kilowatt solar systems. Our price point was hopefully in the 200 range, 200 per square foot. At that point, we felt like an emerging professional or a 80%, 100% of median income family could afford the rent or the mortgage on that piece of property and on the house. And so that's what we went with. Some of the ideas of the affordability of these really did come down to the operational efficiency of the house. We didn't look at these houses as money makers, but we looked at them as something that wouldn't need to have additional money put into them for heating and electricity, for cooking, for all of the regular things that you're doing on a daily basis. They were to be healthy, safe places. Just we talked about indoor air quality and comfort. We use DRVs to move air around and to recoup anything from there. So They were basically what you guys learn about on a daily basis in here. They are energy efficient homes. There's nothing, I'm speaking to a group of people who really, this is pretty normal stuff. So I'm not going to go in depth into the energy efficiency and the performance of these homes. I'm going to go into depth about how we made them and what happened while we built them during COVID. So this is the first one. It's called a so inclined. It's simple. It's a mono pitch roof, open truss design. There is a 2-car garage on this house. It is insulated. And you can either like it or you can hate it. It is not the Taj Mahal. It is about as simple as a form as you get. But it does do some stuff really well. And one of the things it does really well is it holds those solar panels on that roof. It has a 4-foot overhang on the south, so it has some really good passive solar. It has triple glazing on the windows. It has all of the things that you would expect out of a high performance home, but the windows are UPVC. They're not clad. The siding is Eastern white pine. It's not hardy. There's hardy panel in certain spots where rain and water and flashing details needed to be thought about more than in the wood spots. It's not a metal roof. It's an asphalt roof. There's trade-offs to doing affordable housing. No doubt about it. But what the trade-offs don't have to be is from a performing standpoint. So we built this house. It took us 6 months to build. It was supposed to take us 6 months to build, and it took us 6 months to build. So it worked really well. It did exactly what we planned. And part of what I felt, not that I never got it in BCT, but what really I always wondered was, I look at the RS means all the time, right? How many of you guys look at that RS means book? The prices in those books, they're averages. And I never actually knew what was really happening out in the world from a pricing standpoint. And so I brought a little bit of a pricing standpoint into this lecture. Not too much, because I don't want to give away too much here. So these are total costs with land, septic, well, said and done, and the 2-car garage. And you can see these are almost like 2 different homes. One was estimated in December 2020, and one was estimated in May of 21. And that winter was a brutal winter. And you can see what it did to the total cost of this house. It increased at 18% in 4 months. Nothing changed in this house other than the pandemic. So we went from something that was affordable to something that was just on the edge of 120%. Not quite affordable. We had some work to do, is what that meant. The moment we looked at that, we said, well, that's not going to happen. It's not going to work that way. We're going to have to rate, we're going to have to lower that. So we started thinking about it a little bit. Took a real close, material had gone bonkers, absolutely crazy. Framing lumber. So you notice this is a 92-inch stud. So this is a pre-cut stud. So if anybody doesn't know that, studs usually 2x4s are an 8-foot. These are pre-cut at a typical wall height with your plates. Now, never really thought about it before, but at $585 a stud for pre-cut, it was never a huge impact. Now all of a sudden that price went to $864. So it added $3 in 4 months. This is a double stud house, which has a lot of studs in it. It's also 16 inches on center. Partly because we wanted structure on the outside wall that would support. We knew it would support. Partly because it was drawn as 16 inches on center. CDX plywood, $82.63 for a 5/8 sheet. That was up $20 or so from 62. And this was across the board. Every wood material we had was like this. But it wasn't just wood materials. It was also subcontract. So with our business model, we're construction managers and we're contractors. We build, we self-perform, we have subcontractors working for us as well. Our subcontractors, usually the big subcontractors are mechanical, MEP, mechanical, electrical, HVAC, plumbing. Material costs were up for those guys too, and women. It was across the board. So therefore we saw an increase in their cost. Labor was short because they didn't have anybody to work. People were sick, they would have to leave for 10 days. They had nobody. Labor was short. Again, the perfect storm, so to speak. We made a self-imposed requirement because we didn't want our job sites to shut down to one trade at a time. Inside at the, it's a pretty big deal. If you have to limit to one trade, you lose a ton of time. You lose the ability to push schedule and to make stuff affordable for the people who are buying it. So we had to do that. All of this added up to a premium. We paid a premium as the construction manager, and ultimately what was going to happen was our customers were going to pay the premium for it. What ended up happening is we sat down in a room and we made some midstream changes. And it was VE items, right? You guys heard that? That VE is called value engineering. It's a really nice word for saying you're cutting the budget and you're getting rid of stuff. And you're thinking that by getting rid of it, nothing's going to change and the building's going to be the same. And because that's not how it works, right? At all. You cut something out, you miss it. That's what happens. You reduce something, you miss it. So we looked at everything we could on these houses to cut without missing it. And one of the biggest places we did not want to miss was with energy efficiency, because our operational costs, again, were more important to the affordability of this house on a long-term basis than the short-term increase in cost that we had to absorb from that mechanical purchase. So we moved from 16 on center to 24 inches on center. I would say Carl probably is a happy guy right now, hearing that. All right. I don't know. Probably everybody in this room knows the little factor you put into it. But if you're 16 inches on center, it has a lot more heat loss than if you're 24 inches on center, right? So we went to 24 inches on center. We saved ourselves half the material almost, and that reduced the cost. Okay, we're getting there. This was the biggest savings we did. We went with an 8-foot non-cut stud. That's it. We just said the wall is going to be taller. And we took the difference and we threw it into there. That saved us, that brought our stud price down to $4.90. Just doing that. So we had no labor, no one had to cut that stud at the shorter length. And we just took the design difference. We said, okay, we have an 8'3" plate now instead of an 7'9", and we went with it. We went from CDX plywood. This was a harder one. I always prefer to do CDX on a roof. And we went with a zip roof sheathing, which is an OSB product, and it's fine. It's good. But from the wet standpoint, the CDX plywood's a little bit better, and it holds a little bit better. So we went there. We saved a little bit of money, surprisingly. $11 a sheet. So you multiply that by 50, 60 sheets, and all of a sudden you're in thousands. We did the same for the sheathing. So all of it went from CDX to zip. Those were material changes and thoughts. Some of the things that walk around with those changes are things that you wouldn't expect. So because we went to an 8-foot stud inside, it meant that our wall height got taller. It meant that all of a sudden we couldn't use 4-foot sheets of drywall to hit the top. We went 24 inches on center, which meant we had to go to a 5/8 inch sheet of drywall instead of a 1/2 inch. So all these choices had opposite reaction to them. But all in all, we ended up saving 4% of our material costs, 4 to 5% of the material cost from where we had begun in May. So we're getting there. We're getting a little closer. We've shaved that 18 down to about 13 at this point. I'm still not feeling great about it. The customers were happy. They were fine with it. In fact, they were fine with the cost to begin with. They felt like it wasn't a problem to them. They were an older couple, and it was a retirement home, and they were fine with it. But for us, we needed to produce a product that we could replicate, that we could put out there and say over and over and over again, in the worst of conditions, this is what this product's going to cost. So it drove us to some other choices. One of the big ones was we got rid of the metal roof. We went to architectural shingles. And metal at the time, when we estimated this, was about installed standing seam. It was $950 a square. So that $950, 100 square feet, per 100 square feet. In May, that price was more like $1,300 to $1,400. It's now at $1,700. So it's beautiful. It lasts a really long time. It's great for solar. But BE items, sometimes you got to cut it. And so we made that decision and we cut it, and it saved us. An asphalt roof, just as a standard to that, is about 1/5 of the cost of that metal roof. So considerable. This roof was 20 squares. So do the math, right? So now we're down to about 7%. That's what we gained. We gained 7%. Meanwhile, materials up 20%. Mechanical systems are up 15%. Everything's up. Everything's putting pressure on affordability, and it's making it really hard to get there. But here we are building a house and we're only up 7%. So I was happy, and we started breaking ground on it. Then came some supply chain disruptions. These were really easy, actually, to figure out. These were much easier to figure out than what was going on with costs. The thing about supply chains and availability is you either have it or you don't. And you don't have the option to sit around and wait if it's not available. So you make a decision and you move past it, and you go with the decision that you can get. What this means is we stopped specifying things that were really hard to find. We specified really easy, typical Delta faucets. We specified vendors who created mechanical systems right down the road from us. They were a little bit more expensive, but we didn't have to wait 8.5 weeks, and our schedule didn't get messed up because of it. So what can affect affordability in a house is also what your schedule ends up being. Because in any contract that a builder has, that contract stipulates if you, generally speaking, if there's delays for, you know, a God circumstance, an act of God, which we could say that this was an act of God as in terms of the pandemic, then you can charge for that. You can say that's wasting my time. My time is valuable, and so you charge for that, and that puts money and pressure on the project and affordability. So we started to kind of comb through the specification and say, okay, what can come out of here? What do we know is in stock? What are our local vendors saying are problems? And we went and gathered all that information and went to the customer and presented it to them. And thank God the customer was fine with it. But they were, again, they were more than happy. They understood what was happening in the world, and they wanted their house to be built, and they wanted it to stay on budget. So we were able to do that, but it took work. It took at the time, you know, a lot of running around trying to find things that weren't specialized. Another part was manufacturer, labor, and material shortages. So generally speaking, when you start a project, you track your long lead items. You say, okay, I'm going to make a list of all of the things that, you know, are going to be 8 to 10 weeks out. And maybe the next list is stuff that's 12 to 14 weeks out. And generally speaking, you can develop a pretty good project schedule off of lead times, just off of lead times. Of course, that all was not easy to track at all at this time. We would get, you know, emails on a daily basis saying, oh, your windows were at 14 weeks, they're now at 16 weeks. And oh, now we don't know when they're going to be in. The extrusions haven't come in from, you know, wherever in Germany or Poland they're coming in from. So a lot of these things were moving as we were building this thing. And not only did we have to acknowledge those lead times and understand what was happening, but we had to alter our schedule and our build to accommodate that. And if any of you guys have worked with subcontractors and builders in general, they have a path, right? They're like, oh, framing's not done, windows aren't cut in, I'm not putting electrical in the wall. I'm not doing the plumbing until that's done. And so there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of cajoling, there's a lot of saying, hey, we won't cut out those windows, and then you'll be able to put in electrical in the wall. You'll be able to get that rough in the wall. I know we're waiting for 16 weeks for those, but we need to keep the project moving. So a lot of that stuff happened. And we work with amazing tradespeople, and they really did rise to the occasion, and they said, whatever we can do to keep this project going. And so we had a building that had 0 windows in it, and we had full plumbing, full electrical. We had started on insulation, and we're getting going on drywall when the windows showed up, which is completely backwards from the way you typically would do it. But it's the norm. It's what we have to think about now. So generally speaking, you'd love to just have your schedule work from the start, but not in this time and age that we're living here. So one of the biggest things for me in the pandemic was making sure that Wright Builders had strategic resilience. And what strategic resilience is it's looking at a project holistically and as a whole. It's looking at the cause and effect of pandemic, in this case, pandemic related issues, and how your company is going to respond to those issues. We had really pretty huge health strategies on site. So at any given time, we were building 5 to 10 buildings during this time period. This particular project had 1 foreman and 1 project manager on it. We were building River Valley Co-op at the same time in East Hampton. That project was a much bigger project. And we had 2 foremen, a project manager, some APMs, much more in terms of trades, probably 200 tradespeople in and out of that project. So the logistics of those things really came into play. And we needed to figure out a plan that, geez, if one person gets this and we have to shut down the whole site, how are we going to manage that outfall of other people? So what we did is we asked people to get into pods, and we asked that any of the contractors who were working with us, that they sent the same people on every day. And so if one of those people got it, probably all of those people in that pod got it, but we were able to control that pod, get them out of there, and not stop work. The same thing happened at the small house. So it worked really well. It wasn't a scaled thing. It was something that was able to be pushed into every site that we had. We had a health setup. We always want more than one option today. It used to be great that you could just say, hey, you're the person for the job. You'd probably get the best pricing. As a professional, there's nothing anybody likes to hear before they even bid a job, that, hey, the job's yours. It's yours. I like your work, do great work. Generally speaking, you get a better price because of that. They're not fighting. They're not going against other prices. They're not trying to, get the lowest bid. In these scenarios, that all went upside down because all of a sudden we had to have more than one person. If one person went down, we had to have somebody that could step in right behind them. So talking with subs and having them have a plan for if something happened to them, and understanding that our plan was to have a different sub behind them, wasn't easy for them to hear. But in a lot of ways, I think it made them think about being careful, and that they didn't want to get sick and not be on this job. They knew that somebody else was going to be behind them. So the flavor of the month, the flavor of the month is an in-house little thing that we have where we get into a rhythm of asking certain people to do work for us. And what happens, especially in times of pandemic and uncertainty, is that when you put all your eggs into one basket, it can blow up on you. And so we always had somebody else. The flavor of the month went away, in fact, and we split the jobs up really evenly between all of our subs. At any given time, we probably have 6 to 7 different trades of subs that are working. So 6 plumbers, 6 electricians, 6, that are different companies. And it's very easy when you get responses and when you get pricing to just say, oh, I'm going to go with plumber A all the time because they're there and they're responsive. But we had to reach outside of that. We had to get away from that a little bit. So how did it go? It went okay. It went well. It went really well. We stayed on 6-month build schedule like we wanted to. they had a CO in December of 2021. We dug our first bit of dirt on June 5th, 2021, and was in December 12th, 2021. So just over 6 months, with 20 weeks of that 6 months, windows. So a lot of, almost, 2/3 of that 6 months was waiting for windows to get there. So think about how done that building was before those windows actually even came. We had an incredible group of project manager and foreman on that building, and they did an exceptional job and thought about things well before that they were problems, made quick decisions, and were malleable in the decision-making process. The budget. So we came in finally on this project about 5% over where we were from December of 2020. Considering material prices had gone up that much and the delays that we saw and the choices of the change of specifications that we had to do during the process and the amount of clerical and just overall time it took to make those changes, because it's not just making changes, right? It's also people's time that are making those changes. It's going back and having somebody requote. It's losing the time on the job site when you could be doing other work. There's money involved in that. So we gained most of it back. We're about 5% over at the end of the day, but I was very happy at that. It's really within a contingency zone. The material procurement, it was a huge factor. We decided that instead of going with hardy siding, which is manufactured out of here, we called up Lashway, and we got Eastern White Pine channel siding. And they put on 2 coats of Benmore finish for us, and we put it up on the wall. And it was the best decision we made, because what we were waiting for, it was 15 weeks with the lap siding from Hardy, and they couldn't promise it. So again, those decisions have to be made. 15 weeks is a long time in a project that's 6 months. And so if you wait and hope, by the time you're done waiting and hoping, you're in the weeds and you need to make a decision. So we made the decision early on to go with wood. I was happy with that decision. We all know it's a carbon sequestration product, so it's good. Affordability. The build price alone came in a little higher than what we wanted, $228 a square foot, conditioned space. Land, septic, well, brought that total cost to $280 a square foot. The home is net positive and produces power on an annual basis. And so that's really the closing remark here, is that this house, the affordability of this home comes from its performance. It does come from its materials, and it comes from the procurement process, and it comes from the work, but it really comes from how this house is going to operate through the next 50 to 100 years of its lifetime. I didn't put it up here because it has some private information on it too, but the HERS rating on this house, everybody knows HERS ratings, correct? Nod. Yes.
You could give them a recap.
Yeah, okay. So HERS rating is a home energy assessment. And it's a model. It's a simple block model for energy efficiency. And so it looks at a yearly energy use on a house. It looks at heat loss, appliance loads, all of it, and pushes it into one number. In Massachusetts, with stretch energy code, you need a HERS rating of 50 or better to pass code. In the United States, you need a HERS rating of 100 or better to IBC code, which is quite honestly kind of pitiful. This house pre-solar came in right around 17 to 18, maybe a little bit lower. post solar with 7 kilowatts, this house came in at a negative 61 HERS rating, which 0 is net zero. So if you're negative, you're making money off of the house. On an average year, this house is going to make $3,000 off of its solar. So that means they're not paying anything and they're getting paid to live here. And so if you start interpolating these savings throughout years and throughout energy increases, which we'll see, because it's not going to stay at 27 cents a kilowatt. Is it at that? It might even be higher now again. So, you know, when I was in school, I was all up, it was 23 cents a kilowatt hour. Then it went to 25, now it's somewhere in the 27. They'll find an efficiency charge, they'll push it to 31. Before we know it, that's going to be in the 50s, and it's just going to keep climbing because forever energy is going to just get more expensive. So this house forever is just going to make more money. And that's what makes it affordable. It's not the set price off the bat. It's what happens after this house is built. And that makes me proud, honestly. It means that the people who live here are going to live here for 30, 40 years, and they're going to sell this house, or they're going to give it, or their kids are going to inherit it. I shouldn't say that. They could last 50, 60 more years. But the 30 years, 40 years, this house is still going to be making money, and whoever owns it next is also going to make money. So if you make $3,000 a year, I think that's pretty good. I'd be happy with it, and it's exactly what we were going out to do when we made these houses. Yeah, and here's some finished interior, and you know, it was December 12th, so there's no grass growing. It's a little muddy, but the house is done, and they've been living in it, and it's highly net positive. That's it.
Okay. Stay right there. So what we're going to do now, Pat, there are questions that come in on Zoom.
Not yet.
All right. So here's a moment to ask questions. And one of the things that when I asked Seth to do this, I said, one thing that doesn't happen that often in our lectures is that people talk, that the presenters actually talk about money, real dollars. They talk about things and they can seem kind of abstract because sometimes you can use terms like more or less, and it's really not underscoring the importance of the impact of those changes in numbers. So I was especially pleased to hear that. And it's your opportunity now to ask someone a question that really points to affordability, which most of you within the next 10 years will probably be sitting in that seat where it is extremely important to you, either as an individual homeowner or in some capacity, whichever you choose in the AC industry. So it's your chance right now. Yeah.
So I love the focus on the operational costs in the house. Do you work with interested parties or just your thought of the building group for the operational costs of getting to and from? So thinking about transportation costs.
Yeah, I think a lot of our local material sourcing, that comes into play a lot more.
I'm thinking maybe more for the homeowner. So once
Oh,
they're in
for
the
the
house, is it like close to bikeability things? Is it electrical vehicle charging included as an option? Is it close to, the grocery stores, that kind of stuff?
Yep. So that is certainly a concern, more so with developments, multifamily developments and affordable developments. This particular house, it wasn't. And partly because they wanted to be in the woods in Belchertown. But in general, affordability, it is pushed that way. you want to be near, a bus stop, right? It makes sense, the bike route. You want to be near places, again, down here in Amherst, being near Hadley and all the shopping is a huge asset to affordability. Not having to own a car is a huge asset towards affordability. So when you're talking about affordability monies that are generated and pushed out there to developers and builders, those projects have a lot more steam. Projects that can show those connections that you're saying, they're going to be picked up a lot, easier than projects in the middle of the boonies somewhere. So.
How big is your team outside of subs, like your core team over at Wright Builders?
Core team is 20, it fluctuates, 24 to 27 people. Yeah. Generally, we're in 4 project managers, 4 to 5 foremen, a few carpenters, a few general laborers. We have 4 people in our project development staff, so that would be sales and marketing. 3 in AP, accounts payable, and then 2 or 3 APMs, office APMs. Yep. Yes,
I've
Kat.
got a question from your friend Sophie Ashley.
Oh, Sophie.
So how does one go about finding the local smaller sawmills? And how do you tactfully ask about sustainable forestry practices? And did you get any lumber except for siding locally?
Yes, we did get lumber, except for, or other than siding. We did not get studs locally, although all the trusses come from UFP in Belchertown. So relatively local from a truss standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint. The lumber itself is probably coming down from New Hampshire for those. What we did do trim in that house as well. That came from Ponders Hollow. So we sort of did the lash away connection up there. They have a working relationship with Ponders Hollow. So Ponders Hollow did the poplar trim and some of the white pine trim as well. We used poplar as baseboard trim and white pine as a window where it wasn't so much of a denting issue as you have for base. So yes, we did find other wood that way. What was Sophie's other question?
How did you tactfully ask about sustainable forestry
Oh,
practices?
you pick up the phone and you say, you want to make money? I mean, people want to. I think that's something I learned really quickly about when I was in the program here and I called them up. And I did have a relationship with Lashway, particularly after that, after being here. And Laura up there is extremely helpful. But the bottom line is people who are local, they want you to reach out to them. They want to do good. They want to be in the community. They want to be part of a building. It's the same, I grew up, my dad was a builder. We would go around in his truck and he'd say, oh, see, I built that, and I built this. And, people are proud of what they're doing. And I think the most respectful thing you can do, especially to encourage local business and local equity and economies, this micro economies, is ask for their business. I mean, really, it really is that simple. Sustainable forestry, there's a lot of network out there to really push and find sustainable forestry and initiatives that support that forestry mission. I think, from seeing it firsthand is always the best way. And you go up, you talk to a sawyer or a sawyer, and most of them are going to walk you onto the stand that they cut the wood from, or at least tell you where they did. And you can see it firsthand. It's a much better way of actually telling the sustainable nature of what's happening.
Hi to Sophie.
Yeah, hi Sophie. Hope all is well.
All right, guys, well. The coveted VCT water bottle.
Oh,
Thanks a
I
million.
never thought I'd get one.